Of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or transmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Well, good afternoon, folks. So glad you can be tuning in. We are starting about 25 minutes late, so we are still going to have both shows, but we were delayed from the baseball game, so I hope you all enjoyed that baseball game that was just on. And, we have Toby Overdorf and Karina Robertson. So I'm going to take a really quick break here right now and come back to you in about 2 minutes. We're going to set the studio up because of the show just the baseball station. So if you can do a real quick ad. Okay, folks, we're back here on air. What we're going to do is we have Toby scheduled for 5:30, and he is here in the studio. So we're going to be talking with Karina Balderramos Robinson at 6 to 6:30 instead because the baseball game ran over so late. So she has graciously accepted to do her show from the 6 to 6:30 time slot. So right now in the studio, right here, Stuart, Florida, we have Representative Toby Overdorf. How are you doing, Toby?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. It's been a little while since we've had you in the studio, so I'm excited to hear about how the first legislation went up in Tallahassee. Because last time you were a new candidate, and now you're the incumbent.
I am, and it's a different position to be in, most certainly.
It definitely is, and Florida House of Representatives is Toby, District 83, running on the Republican ticket, same as before. And before we get too much into the show, and I have some really great questions for you, Toby, and
I bet you do.
Want to have some wonderful updates as well. I want to thank Stuart Downtown Auction. Love auctions, so do we. Auctions are a great way to get a good deal and see items that you never knew you even wanted. Come explore our inventory of estate items and bid on treasure and leave with a fun memory.
Casey always has good things.
Casey Daniels, the guy, you know it, Toby.
Absolutely.
And when you're serious about selling, so are we. Associate Auctions and Stewart Downtown Auction provide a complete solution to real estate and personal property assets throughout the Treasure Coast. Real auctions, real results. Associate Auctions and Stewart Downtown Auction with Casey Daniel, none other. The auctioneer is 772-291-2806. So that is the start of our show here. I'm so glad Toby's here. We've got so many updates to do. So Toby, before I get into some of the questions, tell me, how was your first session as a representative in District 82 in Tallahassee?
Well, Casey, it was some of what I expected and a lot of what I didn't expect. It was a fire hose that was turned on me when I first won the election and then got up there. And I tell you, that fire hose really hasn't stopped. I think I'm learned a lot more. I'm going to understand a lot of how things work there and the rules and regulations, et cetera, of how the House works, and then how that integrates with the Senate, and then with the governor's office, and then how I can bring all that back home here, and also to understand, where the things are up there, who to talk to, and it's kind of more importantly when not to talk, and to understand all those intricacies. And it's been really interesting to learn all of that, and then also to have a limited modicum of success has really been nice sugar on top, and being able to bring that home has been a good thing.
Tell us about some of the accomplishments you're most proud of in these last 2 years.
Well, in bringing some of the things home, right now we have in the city of Stewart, we have a pretty serious problem with PFAS and PFOA. They're two chemical compounds that were found in a fire foam, and they've been known to be a cancer-causing agent. It's possible that they're associated with a glioblastoma issue that we're having in St. Lucie County.
Okay.
So the city of Stewart recognized it, and they're really the canary in the coal mine, and they've really come ahead and they asked for some monies to be able to take care of the filtration and to get some new wells that are PFOA free. And we were able to bring about 1.1 million home to help with this. So from an appropriation standpoint, that was great. And also to be able to help a restoration of a water body up on the 10 Mile Creek was another huge win there. Legislatively, we did, oh my gosh, I was looking it over, and I had my hand in well over a dozen bills that went to the governor's desk. And it's amazing the different things that we've been able to bring forward. Everything, there was an article, Ed Killer did a great article today on shark finning, and we were able to help Representative Jacobs, get that across the finish line so that shark finning is no longer allowed in the state of Florida.
Wonderful.
Except from the commercial fishermen that have to bring the shark back whole and all that. But the import-export of shark fins, we can't do that anymore in the state, which is the first of its kind. We had water legislation support the amount of fertilizer and different things that they put on their properties. We had a lot of septic to sewer issues. Recycling issues went through, all because of things we had. Additional, we had House Bill 851, which was the human trafficking bill that went through in 2019 session. And I was just on the Human Trafficking Summit today that Attorney General Ashton Moody was putting on. And I have to tell you, the strides that we've made since that legislation went through. I'm now on a statewide human trafficking alliance, and we are responsible for helping to fund the training of police officers, hotel workers, restaurateurs across the state to recognize the signs of human trafficking. I mean, right now, Florida is number 3 in the entire country in human trafficking. And remember, that's not just sex trafficking; it's also labor trafficking.
Right.
And just this past year, there were 9 defined cases of labor trafficking. Right here on the Treasure Coast. So we're not, it's not something that's way out there that nobody knows about. It actually happens here as well. So I was pretty happy thus far. There's a lot more work to get done. And now that we have some momentum behind us and we have some know-how, we'd love to have the opportunity to get back up there and represent the Treasure Coast.
Continue on. David Hafner says hi, and Talk About Martin is also tuning in this evening. So glad that you guys are tuning in. I know that was one of the issues you really seemed to tackle, and that was human trafficking. And obviously, it's something you're very passionate about today, and it's something that you've really made great strides on. I think that's wonderful. I didn't realize Florida was number 3 in the
It is, yeah, most certainly. And I have to give kudos to my wife. She really pushed me on this years and years ago and got the momentum going. And so I made a promise to her, and literally was the first bill that I ever filed was on human trafficking when we got up there in Tallahassee.
Wow.
So kudos to Maggie.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Maggie. Have you agreed with Governor DeSantis's handling of COVID-19 in Florida?
So there is an unwritten playbook here with COVID. We think that we have it tackled, and all of a sudden it comes back. We think that masks are the solution. Yet you look at some data across our country and across the world where we see masks are not the solution, and it's really more of a contact issue. So I think the reality is that our society is learning how to deal with this. We're getting to a point where immunity levels are starting to creep up. We're seeing the positivity go down. And I think it's very easy to blame people in power for situations. I know that I have to take a lot of personal responsibility, whether it's to wear a mask and see if that can help with the situation. I wash my hands with those all the time and try to stay to a level of cleanliness, so either myself or those around me. And I think it's a lot of personal responsibility right now. I know in our company, we did a lot of preparation where we stayed socially distant. If our employees needed to work from home, we were able to make those adaptations. And really, Governor DeSantis, I think, has done the best that he possibly can in these situations. And I certainly would hate to be in charge of an entire state or let alone a country right now, because it unfortunately, viruses have the ability to mutate. Going back to my biology background, really changing side of our building blocks here. Okay. So this is an area that I think is going to be evolving still.
Well, and you certainly, when you first were elected, had to deal with the hepatitis scare.
We certainly did, and we tackled that head on. And I think one of the things that we have found is that the level of our health departments here locally, number one, Martin County has really adapted. I think they've done a better job, and we're going to have to work with our friends to the north in St. Lucie County a little bit closely. And I think there'll be some reviews of how individual health departments held, how they worked, and we're looking forward to kind of holding them responsible and also learning on this and making some adaptations associated with how we can handle a pandemic. It was really interesting when we look back at hepatitis A. I think one of the quotes that I had is that I said I was really worried if, in fact, we actually had a real pandemic. Who knew that years or months after
right.
making that statement that we would actually be facing a real pandemic? So again, it's something that we're learning as we go.
Absolutely. Talk about Martin's tuned in and they said, open things up. That's one of the toughest things about this COVID is all the businesses that have had to be closed down. Mm-hmm. And, it's so tough on our restaurants, our service industry in general.
Oh, certainly. Yep.
A lot of companies were able to transition to work at home, which is wonderful. And
mm-hmm.
that's, I think people have realized we have the technology to do that more effectively than we ever realized being forced to
some
try
minor
it.
things that came out of this are that technology that we're now able to work on from home. Again, our company is we're in land development business and permitting and things. We never slowed down, but that's more because we adapted. But we were not in a position like a restaurant or in a retail situation. In retail situations, we found that now people are doing appointments. People are doing opportunities to do more shopping online. But again, my wife loves to be able to see it, touch it, feel it before she purchases it. And so hopefully we're getting back to that. I do agree that we need to continue to open things up. Open it up as safely as possible. I 100% agree with that. And our economy really needs to have this happen right now. We saw over 600,000 jobs have come back on the rolls here. Our unemployment dipped from 11% to 7.1% statewide. And so we're on our way. Are we there yet? Not by any means, but we're on our way back.
Do you see any additional help legislatively? I worry about two things legislatively. Number one, your budget. You're not going to have as much tax dollars coming in, I wouldn't think, when businesses were closed. So do you see any impacts there coming up legislatively that you're going to have to say, we got to make some more cuts because we don't have the funds coming in? And on the other side of that, is there anything you think the state can do on top of what the federal government is doing to help bring back some of these businesses that were hurt so badly?
Well, first and foremost, on the business side, we need to make sure we have liability coverage for these businesses that are opening back up. I can just see a whole bunch of lawsuits popping up because of a business associated with COVID, and here's the poor business person just starting to get back on their feet, and all of a sudden I think that's one of the very first things we need to tackle, and we're going to get after it so the businesses are covered, they can be able to open up. But we've seen right now our revenues, we're actually back in the black in the state of Florida. It's only by a little bit, but I think it was by about 11.7 million from one of the reports that I saw, but we're not in the red. We're getting back in black. We're getting that revenue in. I think a lot of it also has to deal with Florida was really set up as a state that's low taxes. It's great for business. It's a great environment down here. And we're seeing individuals from the Northeast, from the Midwest flocking down here. I can't tell you how many homes are being bought up right and left, even before they hit the market. My partner he was selling his house. He was about to put it on the market, and he's sold it already. So, I mean, it's amazing how things are flying off the shelves right now. I've talked to realtors. They don't have enough inventory.
I've heard that as well.
So it's amazing what they're doing. And people are tired of the high taxes and the politics of the Northeast or the Midwest. And they long for that ability to come down here. We have much lower taxes. Our Republican-controlled legislature has really seen that we have an even budget. And in fact, we had a surplus as well, $6.5 billion that was available for days like this and for days such as these.
Thankfully,
and knock on wood, I'm going to say it out loud, we haven't had a hurricane. So we're going to keep that going.
That's right. Absolutely. 100% agree with you.
And God bless me. I hope we don't.
I agree with you 100%. And thankfully, Florida's fiscally conservative. And that's why we had that excess funds in there in the budget to try and weather these storms, so to speak. Michael Circus has tuned in and says, excellent point on liability insurance. I agree with him. It's something that wasn't at the top of my mind, but you're 100% right. There's somebody that wants to sue, they will. So, well,
we had talked actually, our friends on the other side of the aisle wanted us to have a special session, but we really felt it wasn't the time because we didn't really know what was going on. We didn't know if it was going to be safe to be able to do that as well. So, but this is an area that we feel is very important to tackle right away.
Absolutely. Talk about Martin said, Toby, we can use some of the sex and child trafficking resources in Indiantown. They actually reached out the other day and said it's a tremendous problem there. So
we are going to be working with Sheriff Snyder as well as the region here. And in order to make sure that we're tackling that issue, and some additional training will happen out there, I'm hoping soon.
Okay. Currently, the legislature is responsible for redrawing the state representatives, senators, and congressional legislative body continue doing that. Of course, we just had our census, so there will be some new districts that are redrawn. What's your thoughts on that?
So we were elected to represent the people, and as a legislative body, and the legislative body should then redraw where we're going to be representing them, and that's how I feel about it. Florida is in line to get anywhere between 2 to 3 new congressional seats based on our population. In fact, the Treasure Coast is one of those fastest growing areas out there. So I think it's really important to have that legislators do that rather than an independent commission. Legislators live it every day. They're in the districts. They understand the needs of the people. And so I look forward to that opportunity.
And you have legislators from all over the state. You're absolutely right. You come together and certainly can understand and talk with each other about what changes your district has seen here in the last 10 years. Do you support legislation requiring all employers to use the federal E-Verify system to check the immigration status of new hires?
We voted on it last year, and I voted affirmatively.
And that was only for, I believe, government employees. What about the agriculture and construction businesses?
So what we voted on last year was a proposal that went through the entire process, from what I understood, and the E-Verify process was brought forward by the businesses associated with exactly what you're talking about. And that's what passed. If we have a stricter standard that comes forward, we'll certainly assess it at that time.
Okay. Do you believe the state or cities and counties should regulate vacation rental properties? I know that's something that has come up already.
So it's interesting. It's a home rule issue that's pretty serious, and the way that we had formulated it, and unfortunately it did go forward, was anywhere where the city or local municipality already has control of it. If it's in a POA or a condominium building or something like that, it would remain in that control there. And so the way that we wrote it and had hoped to pass it, there was a lot of local control that was built into it. But it's a business, and frankly, there's a lot of private property rights as to what is going to be state controlled, what's going to be local controlled on that. But I think that the local governments can, when you look at your plan unit developments, when you look at communities themselves, they can write in their covenants and covenants and restrictions exactly what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And so once we're controlling that, I think that's a little bit different.
Trying to think of issues that may come up again. And I know another one that you guys looked at was not supporting, but term limits for school board members. Is that something you would support or something that let
Absolutely
the voters
support it, yes.
Okay, that's very simple. I have a statement from a nurse. She's working on a cardiovascular unit. The ratio is 6 patients per nurse. We have acute respiratory patients as well as 6 patients in this unit or any unit that's for everyone, because it's too many patients per nurse. We usually have 1 CNA for over 3 patients, sometimes 2, which is still incredibly dangerous. Something about this. Would you support legislation to ensure safe staffing rules for nurses?
That's an interesting legislative process in that all of a sudden you're asking legislators to enter into level of healthcare and legislating what should be healthcare versus a hospital or a staffing situation. It's an area that I don't feel comfortable saying, yes, I would do this or no, I wouldn't do that, because frankly, I'm not as familiar with it. It's something that I certainly would like to look at, but it's not an area that I would feel comfortable saying, yes, absolutely, we need to be looking at that. I think it's a little bit hard to say that we should have legislators entering into how we need to care for a patient.
Right. I completely understand that. I think that their point is, and you were very open, it's something you'll look at. It depends how the law is written, how the legislation's written.
I agree.
And
I think it's a great point, though. I think it should be brought forward.
Would you support legislation, and I think that you would, do you know of any legislation coming up, I should say, that will monitor the point of source pollution? We have so many water issues here. And of course, the point of source pollution, a lot of it comes down from the Kissimmee. Mm-hmm. Is there anything coming down the pike that's going to really hold all landowners responsible for what's going into our rivers?
Well, if we actually pushed forward my bill last year, which was 1463, that actually had the components that required landowners to sign up for the BMP process. And if they didn't sign up for it, then they were going to be within the DEP enforcement side. And along those lines, they had to be inspected every 2 years. And there was monitoring associated with it that was required. So we'll be refiling that bill and bringing it forward again this year. But the BMAPs, which are the large areas that cover an entire region that look at what the pollutants are, things like that, they only work when we have data. We don't have that data at the moment. Okay. So we need to get that data to be able to enforce those standards. Now, there's point and non-point. The point's already regulated. Point source means I can define, all right, this much is coming out of this farm. Non-point is where we have the problem right now, because we really don't know where everything's coming from.
Right.
So we also have to remember this isn't just large landowners. This is also could be smaller landowners. It could be developments and things like that. So it is something we absolutely need to look at. I'm planning on retooling and refiling that bill this year, and hopefully be able to get it through the finish line.
Very good. David Hafner is asking, what are your goals for the coming session, assuming you are reelected?
Well, that's a lot. A lot of it is working on the environment, is working on some regulations associated with the best management practices, working towards items there, and finding that balance between the environment and economics. I think that's a huge thing. We're going to continue to work on restoration. We had a great win this year with Tamiami Trail being removed, if you will, the historic one, and the new one being elevated. So that restoration goals are still there. Would like to continue to work on human trafficking. There is some other areas that we're going to be working in. We're going to be looking at how we can help out with the glioblastoma issue here in St. Lucie County, and looking at those issues. We're going to be reviewing the health department. We're going to be looking at skills training, which is a huge item we haven't even really talked about yet, but really trying to find ways that we can educate our students rather than having them go into huge debt for college. Having them learn a skill and be able to move ahead and get a great employment without necessarily having to have that huge college debt.
That's a very good initiative to have, an excellent initiative. And I with you 100%. Not everybody should go to college. There's so many great paying jobs out there in the trades. Mm-hmm. When you say that's something you're going to work on, you're bringing bills to help fund classes or, bring initiatives into high schools to...
We'll be bringing initiatives forward into high schools and really setting up programs that will push this a little bit further. Hopefully having ways we can incentivize businesses that will look at the apprenticeship program. We found some areas last year with the apprenticeship program where there's some disjoiners where one institution's charging for doing an apprenticeship, another institution isn't. The unions are coming into play. There are some unions that do a great job in training and bringing things forward. There's others. And there's groups that are doing a great job training, but at the same time, there's other people who are taking advantage of it. So we're finding some ways to deal with that. I think is the biggest thing right now. And I just dipped my toe in it last year. And I think we're gonna really tackle it this year so that we can really give that chance for the welders, the machinists, the carpenters to really take off. I tell you, I do a lot of work with the Treasure Coast Builders Association, and they've been a great support. Florida Home Builders, it is amazing. I mean, the average. Please don't take this the wrong way, you people out there, but the average skilled carpenter is getting older and older, as well as welders and things like that. So we've got to have them replaced with people that can do this and that really know how to work with their hands. It's something that it will always be there for us. We always need those skilled people out there.
We certainly do. And I will say locally, I just recently heard IRSC is starting a marine mechanic program. And, here in Florida, that is absolutely perfect. And
I can't tell you how excited I am for the new chancellor up there. Dr. Massey did such a great job in creating a great foundation there. But the new president up there we had a great, it was supposed to be a half-hour meeting. I think it turned into an hour and a half meeting because it was just such great chemistry there. Right. He is fantastic energy. He's going to be supporting the new they're looking to put in Fort Pierce. He's finding new ways we can do stuff. We allocated, we got $4.5 million this last time around for the new skills training center over there. We're going to be allocating more for that, hopefully coming up even in these times, and find some ways to get them some additional money so we can put people back to work. I mean, that's really what the emphasis I think is going to be this next year, is making sure that Florida is getting back to work.
100%. Dave Hafner says, great goals. Let's get you back to Tallahassee.
Thank you, Dave.
Carl Miller has a question. What have you accomplished as a state representative and in your recent term? Please be specific in what you believe you have accomplished as a state representative.
So thanks, Carl, for the question. If you'd like to look through the accomplishments we have, again, about 12 and a half bills. Typically, a freshman legislator is lucky if they get one or two in a year to the governor's desk. We were able to do that over the time that we've been there. Being specific, it's, again, everything from the water legislation that we did, human trafficking legislation, shark bills. We did a county boundary modification in St. Lucie. So here's a specific one that's really kind of interesting. My freshman year, if you noticed in Palm Beach County, we always had a little election problems here and there around election time. We had a little hanging chad. We had some ballots that didn't necessarily. So
very polite about
Palm Beach, something that was different than every other county. You had to fill in a line to indicate who you were going to vote for.
Okay.
What do we do up here? We fill in an oval.
Right.
It goes in. There's no change about it. Whatever else. So one of the other first things that I did legislatively was put on a bill that we did through State Affairs that every ballot had to be the same and all had to be filled in with an oval. And simple piece of legislation, but it's something that it's pretty cool to look around the state and realize that was something that I did. And so that's a very concrete piece of legislation that now says every ballot has to look the same, at least from the voting method of filling in the oval.
It actually makes sense, and I'm glad you got that. It really does, and I'm glad you got that passed.
Common sense legislation.
It's amazing.
It's not just a phrase.
So exactly. Working in Tallahassee, how did you feel? Working across the aisle. Is it obviously the Republicans have the majority? So, did you see a lot of work across the aisle, or did you see mainly the Republicans going, "We got to get this done"? So,
it's interesting. We have. in the Florida legislature, it's not the same as Washington by any means. I have some very good friends across the aisle, and we were able to work on some bipartisan legislation. In fact, if you look back at the bill history, there's a multitude of bills that were passed almost unanimously. Our shark finning bill was done unanimously across the board. The teacher pay raises was another bill that was a overwhelming majority voted for that. That was another bill. Carl Miller, that's another bill I did. That House Bill 641, which was brought forward teacher salary raises and went from 26th in the nation to 5th in the nation as far as starting salary.
Wow.
So it was, again, that bipartisanship is certainly there. Are there issues that we differ on? Absolutely there are. And I think that is what, there are some, the fiscal conservative side of the Republican side will keep us separated, if you will, from some of those issues. But I would say that we're very different than the U.S. Congress. I think Florida is a very functional legislative body.
I remember hearing a statistic up there a few years ago that actually the Democrats and Republicans in Tallahassee agree like high 90s. It's like 97, 98% of the time. So, it's just a few issues that they don't, but for the overall part, our legislature works pretty well.
There are cornerstone issues that we disagree on.
Right, right, of course. And those are the ones that really get covered in the media. So tell us a little bit more about the water. We've got about 3.5 minutes left, but that's really our biggest issue here besides COVID right now, but here in this district. You had talked about that some projects were completed last session. Do you see more coming forward immediately, or do they have to be voted on yet? Are they funded?
There are some that are coming forward right away, yes. Right now, it's a horrible position that we're in that we're literally one named storm away from a large discharge here on the Treasure Coast. So we want to make sure that we can handle that discharge. There are projects that are coming on board. If you look at the C-25, we have a project there that's going to be taking water from the local runoff and putting it north to the St. Johns River. Wow. This is unheard of, and it's a fantastic way of taking almost 25% of our water out of our region and putting it to the north. We have other opportunities to be starting to send more water south with the Tamiami Trail being restored and having that plug removed, if you will. We have another opportunity to get water south. And the EAA reservoir is under construction. And finally, the C-44 is now able to take water, and we're expanding upon that. So another piece of legislation that I was able to push through was taking the Corps of Engineers permitting and putting it over to the state and putting it to DEP. What that does is now when we pick up the phone, somebody will answer, and we can actually get our permits done a lot faster than that means faster restoration.
Wonderful. How are we doing with getting federal funding to manage the state? That was something that was always lacking. They're supposed to, but actually getting the money was another thing.
Absolutely. So President Trump has been amazing in getting us that money. We have waited for 6 years through multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat, to bring money here to the state of Florida. President Trump was the first president since I think Woodrow Wilson to visit Lake Okeechobee, and he made a promise to get us money there, and he did. And he have started to close the gap there as far as. And so I'm very grateful for that effort. I'm grateful to Congress and to Brian Mast and to others out there that had a hand in that, and Senator Rubio and Senator Scott for bringing that money home.
So important. So very important. Michael Circus says, thank you for addressing local basin runoff. Something else I want to mention, I don't think the bill actually went through, but it was so important here, and that's the Martin County Fair.
Yes.
I know you tried to get some funding to help them out because they're going to be building the new facility out by Indiantown. So.
So we got it approved through the House. Our Senate partners, and no fault of Miss Harrell, but our Senate partners didn't get that done, and she tried hard. At this point in time, we'll probably go back. It's not a great atmosphere to get it done in, but they are certainly deserving of it, and hopefully we'll be able to get them some help from the state to move out west.
Absolutely. The funding would be so helpful. They're running into problems and struggling a little bit with fundraising, as everybody is right now due to COVID. So
that's a problem with fundraising?
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can't believe it. So Toby Overdorf, representative here.
Yeah.
I don't know why I have 82 on my mind. District 83, Florida House Representatives, the incumbent running on the Republican ticket. Of course, people need to reach out to you through your website.
Absolutely. TobyForHouse.com. And I'm on Facebook, everything else, and I'm the only Toby on the ballot.
The only Toby on the ballot. Thank you, Toby Overdorf.
Thank you.
WSTU Stewart, Time for Fox News.
Tired of lines at the boat launch? Sun damage or not using your boat because of the hassle? Call Meridian Marina and Yacht Club because we do all the work so you can enjoy your boating lifestyle. We store your boat inside to launch it with a wash with just 30 minutes notice and rinse it down before putting it back. We do the work so you can enjoy your day on the water. Call us up at 772-221-8198 or visit us online at meridianmarina.com for more information. I also want to remind everybody that you can sign up for a weekly notification of who the special weekly guest will be at thecaseyingramshow.com. I'll send out an email so you can see if it's going to be Representative Toby Overdorf or Karina Balderramos-Robinson that is with us. So we're very excited. And Karina, do I have you on the line? We do not yet. So Karina, we are trying to call in. Give her 1 second here. I think Karina is trying to call in. She's actually calling me on my cell phone. And Karina, if you can, 772-220-WSTU or 9788. I'm going to let Ray, while I talk, maybe talk to Karina. Are you able to talk to her and see if we can get her on the line? I know she was here, folks. We had a baseball game that just completely delayed our first show, which Karina was supposed to be on. So she's very graciously calling in from home for this half-hour show. And we're definitely want to hear from Karina Balderramos-Robinson. She is the Democratic candidate for Florida Senate 25. She's very anxious to be on the show, and I think we're just getting the phone hopefully to hook up. So while we're doing that, I want to let everybody know that next week I had a cancellation at the 5:30 to 6 o'clock hour. And because of that, I'm able to have KW Miller in. KW is running for the Congressional District 18 race, but he's on the independent ticket. And being he's on the independent ticket, the normal media, the mainstream media has completely ignored him. They are not allowing him to participate in debates. So not sure what's going on there, but I said, KW, why don't you come on the air? I'll give you some airtime, and we're going to ask some of the questions that we heard in the debate from WPTV this past week for CD18 candidates, and we're going to ask them to Carl. So I hope to give you, the listener, a little better idea of who that third independent candidate is. So again, that's going to be next week at 5:30 to 6. We'll have KW Miller on and ask him those questions. So I think Karina's been able to connect with us now. Karina, how are you doing?
I am doing fabulous. How are you? Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you, Karina. We've had kind of a crazy little day, so I really appreciate that you're calling in now. So excited to hear about you. We do have the Facebook Live video going, so folks, you can ask questions to Karina through the Facebook Live, but she is the Democratic candidate running for Florida Senate 25. Karina, last time you were on the air with me, it was actually through Zoom because we were all home because of COVID. So now we have you back here also on WSTU AM 1450. So let's start out a little bit. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself and why you're running for Florida Senate 25?
Absolutely. So I'm just a humble servant for communities, honestly. I was born and raised in South Dakota and left the age 17, straight out of high school to join the U.S. Army. Straight out of my father's footsteps, and never would have thought I spent 25 years on active duty, but spent the majority of that time in the military police corps, serving overseas and having the opportunity to raise a family. I now have 3 grown boys who reside here in Southeast Florida. And after my service, worked at senior governmental positions at the Pentagon and throughout Washington, D.C., ran a very good congressional race in a very heavy red district. But all that aside, I believe people saw me as a patriot first. I certainly can work across party lines and find that common ground. And have lived in Florida for about 6 years now, helping educate students all across the world with regard to violent extremism, or working with different programs to make sure we have a concerted effort across our world to protect one another, not just with regard to law enforcement, but just looking at community policing and terrorism and all the great things. But all that aside, I truly believe that Senate District 25 is the place I need to be, because we're dealing with a pandemic where a lot of leadership is required. I'm grateful to have a PhD in Homeland Security, where my dissertation was on emergency management with regard to legislative decision making. So when I see the decisions that we've made as this pandemic unfolded and how we've handled it within Florida, I just could not sleep at night, knowing that I certainly have to lean forward and say how I can take care of our community.
Very well. And that's incredible background, Karina. Appreciate you sharing that with us. What do you see addressing the issues here locally different than, our current senator, the incumbent, is doing? Where do you want to improve, or what do you see needs to be improved?
What I'd hope to see is more transparency. I know it's difficult right now because sessions are not necessarily taking place. I was really surprised to know that when this pandemic was first unfolding, we became aware of its spread, that there was not a special session that was hosted. And I know it would have put people at risk, but just to talk about what is needed, to have the testing stations farther, put out across the state, and the National Guard certainly leaned forward to help in that effort to make sure that we had programs in place so when people weren't going to work, that they had a way to subsidize their expenses through the unemployment system. And we all know that took a while for it to work. And perhaps the vendor that was chosen wasn't doing a reputable job. But I do say that I believe our governor tried to, with different advisors, try to get things moving, but it was not fast enough. And here in our district, I think we should have been more careful about the wearing of our masks all the time. We are in phase 3 of the reopening of businesses, so let's just be careful about that, in that we want businesses to flourish, but we don't want to spread the virus. And certainly my heart goes out to the children. I raised 3 boys, and so when we're reopening the schools and we see patterns of whether or not people are spreading the infection or not, that we just have to be honest with one another and really be accountable to the people. I would mention when I was overseeing, soldiers at war or directing force protection at the Pentagon, we had to look at very complex data and analysis. And if there were decisions that were made collectively, we were all held accountable, whether that was paying a fine for an environmental hazard, or it was a loss of a soldier where we're calling their parents to say that they have died or passed on for whatever reason. So I guess I'm saying I take this job seriously, that I want people to know that in my heart, I'm there to serve the people and work across party lines and protect them.
Karina, if you're elected, what would be your top 3 issues as a legislature of, a tackling here for the district?
Within this district, I think I would work very hard to protect home rule rates without a lot of state interference. I want to promote legislation that makes Florida the best place and an affordable place to live, and attract people who will contribute to that tax base, and increase our tax revenues. I would say I also want to embrace, legislation that's the will of people. And, for example, I think in the past we haven't always done that. We've not embraced the autonomy of decisions about their health. We should be allowing former felons to vote without paying an extreme poll tax. And we know that there's organizations out there helping that happen anyway. But when the will of the people vote for something, we should adhere and live up to that. And lastly, I would say, of course, our environment, such as Representative Toby Overdose spoke of. There are so many things that we can do to make sure that our organizations and agencies are accountable. I've worked with the Army Corps of Engineers before, and that, as long as we have good, wholehearted discussions and working in the right direction with policy and strategy to make sure that we're looking at it from a holistic perspective. You know, we have to look at the big corporations. We have to look at the homeowners. You know, are we trying everything we can to make sure that the money that has been dedicated for these programs is being used wisely and not be funneled towards other alternatives that are for some other legislative aspect?
Very important. I would say that the water issues is such a long-standing issue here in the district, and definitely one of the top issues for everybody. COVID may compete with that at the moment, but when COVID goes away, our water issues will surely be number one again. So something that's always there. And I had actually asked Representative Overdorf about legislation to monitor the point of source pollution. There's a lot of runoff in our basins, and there's water coming in, polluted water from the Kissimmee that comes from the north. So there's a lot of areas where it's flowing in that we really do not have a good handle on.
Right. He spoke of point and no point. And, making sure that, the inspections occur frequently and the results of those inspections are transparent and releasable to the public. And that we don't have a program in place that's not really effective because it's not being fully implemented. And I'm not really a proponent of fines and making people feel uncomfortable about whether or not it's worth it to have their business because of all these fines. But at the end of the day, we all have to work towards a common objective and keep our water clean.
And with COVID, if you're elected, what would you propose to do to help these businesses that have been closed down and restricted on the amount of business they can have for months now?
Well, as a small business owner, I would hope that through the state legislature that we can encourage liability insurance coverage for our businesses that are reopening. I mean, they are at risk if somebody was to present a lawsuit because for whatever reason they've contracted the virus, they were forced to work, or there was no flexibility in their schedule. That needs to be something that should take place. And also to give people the choice. I mean, it's hard when we've been giving unemployment for so long. I can imagine our governor when we have given so much to people already to sustain their way of life, to pay their rent, to feed their families, and we need federal assistance as well. But that money is going to be running out. And so how is it we encourage the businesses to reopen fully, but not put people at risk? It's hard to do, but we all have to be responsible.
It is a very tough time right now, and we're learning as we're going, and we've learned so much, but it's pretty quick. Do you agree with Governor DeSantis's handling of COVID-19?
I believe he could have done things differently. In his shoes, and you weigh heavily on your advisors. It's just like the president and our National Security Council. That I believe in the position he was in, he was hesitant because he was really looking at it from a national level. That, okay, so this is happening, and how quickly is it going to happen? And let's plan for it. But in the state of Florida, where a lot of our revenue is based off tourism, we needed to immediately have acted to protect the people and the businesses from that pandemic spreading as quickly as it did. And the hospitals and the clinics were so overwhelmed. And we could have deployed the National Guard a lot earlier to set up more testing facilities. It wasn't probably, I think, until April or May to where they were really fully set up in different locations where you didn't have to have a temperature of 104 to get an appointment to be tested. And I think he should have taken it a little bit more seriously, and perhaps we wouldn't have had as many casualties as we have had.
Currently, the legislature is responsible for redrawing the state representatives, senators, and congressional districts. Should the redrawing of congressional districts be controlled by an independent, nonpartisan commission, or do you think it should remain with the legislature?
No, it should be independent. I mean, it's for so long that, when we talk about gerrymandering to redraw the districts so often, I mean, the census takes place every 10 years, but it would seem more honest if there was a third party person that did do it versus the state legislature.
Do you support term limits for school board members? That's something that has come up in the past session, probably come up again.
I believe that we should look at those term limits for them because some people are in for quite a period of time where change and new ways of thinking and programs may not be entered into a facility or an institution. But again, I would leave that up to the decisions of the particular county and to see what they deem is best for their community.
And kind of following along the same line of home rule and letting counties decide with vacation rentals, do you believe the state or cities and counties should regulate vacation rental properties?
I believe with regard to home rule, we should allow the local communities to kind of control that. However, if there is risk to the community, we have to look out for human traffickers and sex offenders, that, there are things that matter and we need to pay attention to those statistics before we just allow freedom for just rentals to happen without any accountability to what risk the community is at.
On immigration, do you support legislation requiring all employers to use the federal E-Verify system to check the immigration status of new hires? They have passed a law that mandated all government employers use E-Verify, but they made it optional for many businesses. And a lot of businesses opposed it from the agricultural, construction, and tourism industries. So would you support a E-Verify system for all? I
do. And I would add to that, for a long, long time, my grandmother grew up in Mexico and she migrated to America, and every one of us, went to school. We had a great education. We became American citizens. So I feel for any employer who's bringing migrants into work that in good faith that they're trustworthy people. So run the check. If there's anything negative, then we do need to be accountable to the people. So I would just encourage everyone to do it.
Absolutely. So Karina, if you were to be elected, what would you be, where would you hit the ground running your first term? What would be your main focuses? We've talked a lot of general issues that you want to focus on, but what would be some bills or legislation that you would want to create to help our district here?
Well, we just touched on it a little bit earlier, but, we talked about human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
As a small business owner, I've traveled to a lot of countries in the last few years, whether it be Guatemala or Colombia, Iraq, Tajikistan. And I truly believe that most families that try to cross our borders to come here have every good intention to find a safer place for their families. So I would definitely make sure that we look at the way we're treating those categories of people. We should not be, treating them as if they're lesser people, and whether it's, putting them in temporary holding facilities, cages, run them through the check, and then somehow find a way for them to find employment. If that means getting them on a bus to another state, Wyoming, Iowa, wherever, where there's jobs, to give them a better quality of life. And so that is one of the things that I would pursue. Making sure that our felons, our former felons, our returning citizens have the right to vote. They've served their time. And I was former law enforcement for a long time. So I truly believe that when we, people are serving their time, when they're let free, they should be considered citizens just like everyone else. And also I would make sure that anything with regard to education, that there be equity. I'm a product of the public school system. I know our teachers are decently paid here in Florida. However, we could do so much better. We could have more mental health counseling. We could have counselors. We could have nurses. We could have more people in the school system to make sure that our students feel safe, that they have a refuge of someone to talk to when they feel uncomfortable or when they feel threatened or bullied. And that in comparison with charter schools or different types of faith-based institutions, that there be equity. Everyone deserves the very best in education. And definitely voting, we need to make sure it is not, in the future, that is not suppressed, that we don't have foreign entities disrupting our election systems. We know that's happening now. And then, of course, most importantly, I would say taking care of our environment. It's like you said, Casey, that regardless of everything that changes over in the next year or two, our environment, our risks to the water, in the air, in the soil that we walk on, that we breathe, that we fish in, that we sail in, we have to take care of it. Climate change certainly has its effect on the world, and especially here in Florida. So I will do everything possible to make sure I pay attention to everything. I mean, God willing, I can be on the right committees to work across party lines to get bills on the floor and get them passed and resourced and funded. There's so much I want to do. I just want to get elected and get to work.
So we're speaking with Karina Balderramos Robinson. She's running for the Florida Senate 25 on the Democratic ticket. Karina, it has been so wonderful to speak with you. We're winding down to our last 20 seconds. If people want to reach out to you, what's a good way for them to reach you?
As on the chat, www.Karina, Corina, the word for, FOR, Florida.us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Karina Balderramos Robinson. Good luck to you. So wonderful chatting with you today.